Thank you so much, Paul. You said a lot of the things that I was planning to say today, which is great because it means we'll hopefully get to our break on time. If we run a little bit over, we will still have a break. I'm Deborah Jonas, and it's such a pleasure to be here with so many people who are deeply invested in strengthening the use of evidence-based practices to make a difference for kids and help really create that equitable education system and that we need to strengthen communities, strengthen families, and help our children and youth grow into the best people they can be. I'm Deborah Jonas. I'm director of SRI's Center for Education Policy. I also direct our Regional Educational Laboratory, which is one of 10 labs around the country. We serve Kentucky, West Virginia, and Tennessee. John Hughes, who is one of the leaders in REL Southeast that serves Florida, is also here with us today. And the RELs partner with educators and stakeholders to carry out research and evaluation projects to help our partners use evidence in practice. And then, like Paul mentioned with Helios, we like to share what we learn, not only within our region, but around the country, so that everybody has the information they need to use evidence-based practices and make a difference for kids and youth and families. Paul provided the context for our conversations today in developing evidence while you innovate, which, as Paul mentioned, is a real challenge. Using evidence to inform your work to increase equitable access for students, and really thinking about what different students need at the time. How can evidence help you all target the interventions and supports that will really propel them to excellence? Part of the context for using evidence-based practices is ESSA. So you may know that ESSA has those 4 tiers that Paul shared, and ESSA encourages all educators to use the strongest evidence available in practice. It also requires certain schools, the use of certain federal funds can only be used for moderate and strong interventions to make a difference for kids in our most struggling schools. And that really provides a lot of the context for the importance and the need for evidence-based practices. And thinking about why that is, it's important to use available evidence for a variety of reasons. Can help you select or develop new approaches to teaching and learning so we can increase the chances that our students have better learning outcomes. It can help us target supports for specific populations, tailor programs, as I said, to match student learning needs with practices that evidence shows are most likely to benefit student learning and their outcomes over time. What we did here is provide some examples of how partnering with researchers can really help maximize student learning. And an example, researchers bring a toolkit that includes the kinds of evidence, developing or identifying the kinds of evidence that the federal law ESSA suggests we need in practice, but we can also do a lot more than that. And let me sort of share an example of how we use evidence in our partnerships. In one of our groups, we have a group of educators that are really focusing on strengthening mathematics outcomes. And what they tell us is we've tried all these interventions over the years, we still have lots of them in our schools, and hang on, before we select a new one and start over, let's see what's working. And they have no idea whether anything's making a difference for their students at this time. They don't know exactly how to monitor the data. They don't know how to evaluate the impact of their programs on student learning outcomes, or even to know whether teachers are implementing the program in a way that it was designed. And so if it's evidence-based, does it maximize student learning on the other end? And are kids learning what they need to know to really move on to the next phases in their education? So we are providing supports as researchers to the group of school districts to help them understand, are the programs you're offering, is there an evidence base for them? And what level of evidence is there? How can you, with a combination of different kinds of data, whether it be teacher observations and really formative walkthroughs, their formative assessments from students, summative assessments, how can you blend that information to learn whether you're moving the needle in those classrooms. And so that's just a concrete example. And one of the things to keep in mind is the more evidence from rigorous scientific work you use, the more likely, whether it's your innovative program or a selection process, the more likely you are to make a difference for students and youth that you're serving. And that's why we're so passionate about this. You know, in the research community, we bring our toolkit to you all as educators to really make a difference in people's lives. I personally, that's why I do what I do. And that's why all of us at SRI do what we do. And when we think about evidence, I think this has a, yeah. So ESSA Guidelines, can you guys hear me? Oh. We developed a framework for the different types of research that we might provide that go beyond the 4 tiers within ESSA. That works with you at different stages of either developing a new program or implementing that program at scale. And so if you're in the early phases, you want to think about what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve and what are the strategies you're using and how do they connect and what does the evidence show supports that. We might help you develop a logic model to really think through what you're trying to do and define and articulate what are the outcomes you want to achieve. And then with that logic model, we can help you figure out how to measure the different pieces and how to select strategies or tweak the strategies you already have. And that's not part of ESSA Guidelines. It can help you demonstrate a rationale, but you don't have a rationale necessarily until you have a logic model. And if you go up through an innovation process and a development process, you'd go through to widespread adoption, where we might work with you to design and carry out a randomized controlled trial, an experiment. And these can happen naturally, where you might have a lottery process for students to participate in the program. You can design it to roll your program out in a way that is amenable to the gold standard of scientific research. And we can also work with you on other types of evaluation designs that make sense for the context of your community. And we always like to think about how is it that even if we're doing the most rigorous study, how is it that we can inform you about practices along the way that seem to be most impactful for your kids, with formative feedback to educators, to leaders, on how to improve your practice along the way. So you don't necessarily have to wait 5 years to learn something and gain really critical insights about the interventions and supports you're trying to provide, so you can increase your chances of making a difference for kids. All of this with systematic and objective methods that really run the gamut from surveys, observations, assessments, etc. Oh, I think I did it. Maybe not. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have a panel and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions as well.